Hey guys, doing a quick video here of a replacement of a carburetor on a 675 series pressure washer. It's a Craftsman with a Briggs and Stratton engine. The reason for the carburetor replacement is because the old carburetor that was just removed, I didn't video that part, but I'm gonna video the installation. This is the old carburetor. It was actually leaking from this tiny little hole right here. A lot of fuel was actually leaking out of there. So I disconnected the old one. I put a plug in the fuel line temporarily just so I'm not getting gas all over everything. And then I ordered a new kit off of Amazon. It was about $16.99 or something like that, which I was actually shocked by. But it came with everything you see here. A new carburetor. I'll go ahead and take that out of the bag. Came with a new carburetor. Hopefully this one is not leaking like the old one, but the carburetor seems to be the right one. It was very difficult, even with the use of multiple websites, to figure out what the exact part number of the carburetor I had was. So I'm taking a little bit of a gamble here, but I'm assuming that this is the right one because it looks identical to the old one that I had. So this one is the Briggs and Stratton factory one. This is the aftermarket. You could tell one's got the Hallmark Briggs and Stratton logo on it. Some of the stampings in there from the foundry, I'm assuming. But other than that, I mean, it looks pretty much identical. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this guy a whirl, see what happens. Hopefully we are not leaking any fuel when we're done here. The kit also included a new fuel line, but as you can see, this pressure washer is practically in brand new condition. So I already have a fuel line on there that's the right length and everything, so I'm not going to be using that. It also came with some other parts. I think this is more of a general kit. It's got like a fuel shut-off, fuel filter in there. There's a primer bulb in there, some new clips for the fuel line, and it also has a spark plug, a new spark plug, which I don't even know if that's the right spark plug for this or not, because like I said, this is a little more of a universal kit for it could be any Craftsman motor that came out of could have been a lawnmower, could have been a pressure washer, could have been who knows what. So it also came with new gaskets for the carburetor. There's an O-ring here that needs to come off still. Go ahead and take that one off in a second, but it came with a new gasket kit, and it also came with a brand new air filter, which the air filter that was on this pressure washer was practically new anyways, so I don't know if I'm going to be using that or not, but anyhow, the kit comes with it in case you need to change yours, so good to know. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Probably going to end up fast forwarding through some of this video because a lot of it's going to be just me fumbling around with tools, and I'm going to try to either show you on the camera what size everything is, or at least call it out in the video or something. I haven't really decided 100% yet, so bear with me. Please ignore the music in the background. Don't even know if you can hear it or not, but actually this O-ring probably doesn't even need to be changed, but we'll go ahead and pop it off anyways, since the kit came with a new one. Okay, so obviously the removal is going to be more or less the same as the opposite of the install. So even though you do not or will not see the removal video, it's the same exact as the installation. So this was just, I know this is not probably the best angle from the camera, but I'm trying to get it on so I can work on my workbench, but I can also let you guys see what I'm doing here. So there's a new O-ring that goes right here. I don't know how if you can see that or not, but there's a new O-ring that goes right here where the intake goes from the carburetor into the engine. So that needs to be replaced, which has been done already. I'm gonna try to lower the camera a little bit, see if we can get a little bit better better angle for you guys out there. Now it's kind of a weird angle, and I'm trying not to have my hands be in the way either. This maybe is a little bit better for you. Okay, so alright, so this the 2 screws that go into the carburetor itself are 10 mil. So those are 10 millimeter. I don't know if you can see that well in the video, but those are 10 millimeter. And those are these types of bolts. So there's 2 of them that actually hold the carburetor in. So we went ahead and swapped out the O-ring already. So what we're going to do is put the carburetor back in its original position. There is this actually mounts on here like this. I'm going to show you how that works in a second, but if you can see back here in the back, there's a rod that before you actually mount the carburetor, this rod needs to be slipped onto this right here, into this hole. So before we can mount the carburetor, we have to get that in there. It's not that tricky, it's just kind of like a little bit of a Z bracket. So I don't know why I said that. This thing's gonna make a liar out of me. Okay, this is probably really cheap plastic, so I would strongly recommend you try your hardest not to break this. Okay, so we got that in there. Carburetor's up against its O-ring, so we're gonna go ahead and get one of these bolts started, just to kind of hold that in there. And then we'll go ahead and get the other bolt in there. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. I had to run inside and actually grab a different drill real quick. I wanted to use for this. Okay, that should be pretty good there. I'm not really sure if there is a factory torque spec or not for these. I'm sure there is, but it's gonna have to be good for right now. So this bracket goes right on top of here. And as you can see, that actuates that by the actual RPM of the engine. So that actually opens and closes depending on what the RPMs are at. That's held on by this bolt here. So you guys get an idea what that looks like. And that, if I remember correctly, when I took this apart, I think it was a 7mm. Let's see if that's really what it was. I think it was. No, it was actually a 1/4 inch. So 7mm was a little loose on it. So this is a 1/4 inch, and that actually fits on there very well. So. You want to make sure. I mean, this is actually set up specifically so that it should not really tighten too tight where you can't actuate this. I mean, as you can see, this is moving very freely, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. So that's exactly what we want there. And then there's also a small spring which holds that piece tight, and I'll show you guys that spring. This is what that spring is. And that spring connects. Let's see if I can get in there a little closer for a better angle for you guys. That spring actually connects right between this hook right here on that piece that we just installed and this hook right back here, this metal piece right next to the inside of the engine there. So let's go ahead and see if we can get that spring in there. This should be interesting. Okay, that's all that there's to that. So our engine RPMs go up, and this actually activates this, and it's got the return spring on there to return it back to where it needs to be. So there you go. And now I don't know what that piece is, some kind of shroud or something. I don't necessarily want to connect the fuel line quite yet, because I do have fuel in the gas tank right now. This piece has to reconnect on there. This is the air filter connector cover. I went ahead and put the bolt back in there just for temporary, just to keep the air filter and everything together, keep the bolts so I know where they're at. But that needs to come back out. So I believe that was an 8mm. Yep, it's an 8mm. So it's only finger tight really, so, but I just wanted to show you guys what size it is. So we're gonna go ahead and take this guy back out. So here's the screw that goes in there. You can take it out, it comes out. You don't have to, I mean, just keep it in there by friction. As you can see, this had a pretty much brand new air filter in it. I mean, it's very clean. It did get a little bit of fuel on it though, because the carburetor was leaking, and the kit came with a new one, so might as well put the new one in, right? So as you can see, the new one looks almost identical, except it's clean. It looks like it's slightly smaller, maybe barely. These fins are a little bit folded in, so maybe that's what's going on there, but I mean, it's probably the same exact size. So we're gonna go ahead and pop that one in there in a second. But this cover needs to be popped over this guy. But before we do that, there's actually a new gasket that came in the kit. We're gonna be using, so the old gasket, to be perfectly honest with you. It just goes between a piece of plastic and the carburetor. I'm sure it's the old one would have been perfectly fine, but since it came with a new one, we'll use a new one. So you got the new gasket. There's really only one way that this can go on in order to line up with all the holes. There's little points on here that actually have to line up with the gasket. So the gasket already has those holes in it, and here are the respective bolt holes as well. These two bigger holes. So that's really the only way this gasket can go on. And like I said, you know, this gasket, whether we use the new one or the old one, probably didn't really matter a whole lot. So, but since it came with a new one, we're going to go ahead and use the new one. Okay, there's 3 screws that hold this plastic piece on. There's one that goes here, one here, and one here. And respectively, they go in this hole here, and 2 in the carburetor itself. So we'll go ahead and get this guy lined up. You got to connect this hose also. This little guy here on the back. So if you can see that, this guy goes right on there. Go ahead and get these, get one of these bolts started, just to kind of hold this plastic on. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you what size those are. Those are also 8mm. So